John, traffic is always at the top of everybody's mind in League City, and as we saw in the video, there's a lot of work going on to relieve congestion. Can you tell us what the updates on those projects are and what we can see in 2023?
Sure, Dan. If I could just take a moment from former Mayor Hallisey's playbook, I'd like to just recognize a couple of people. I know Senator Middleton walked in a few minutes ago, and then our council members that are here, Sean Saunders, Tom Cruise, and Mayor Pro Tem Andy Mann. And then lastly, I'd like our staff that helps make everything happen stand up just for a second, and I'll give them a round of applause. So thank you for... They're the ones that are going to make sure I-45 gets done. So, you know, that's the first time I saw Mayor Long's speech, and so just like former Mayor Hallisey, he steals lots of the thunder, so I'll try not to be too redundant. But when we think about, you know, League City's consistently the most important thing, the citizens list, you know, traffic is that. And so we have not rested on our laurels. We have worked hard to help push projects forward. Some of those are city projects, some of those are state projects, some of those are developer-driven projects. And so Mayor Long did steal the thunder on I-45. It started, you know, about 4 years ago. TxDOT told us 4 or 5 years to complete it. The major section from 518 to 517, really most of the difficult pieces of those are done. They're not quite done, but that certainly will be done this year. And then the one that gives us all the headaches from Nassau Bypass to 518, TxDOT's working hard to give us a lot of discomfort so they get that thing done in the next few months. And so we are excited about that. You know, I've been with League City now nearly 11 years, and I've worked tirelessly on the Grand Parkway, certainly with the help from our county representatives and you know, TxDOT trying to remove the boulders from the way to get that thing to move forward. And so last August, we all went up and visited with TxDOT and the Transportation Commission, and I think we've moved the last major obstacle out. As I understand it, Galveston County and TxDOT have removed what they called the primacy issue, which was really who's going to build the highways. Is it going to be Galveston County or is it going to be TxDOT? And so things seem to be moving ahead. I've had a couple meetings with TxDOT since then. They're working on land acquisition. They're working on design for next year. We've worked closely with the development community to preserve the corridor where we can to make that roadway move forward, you know, more smoothly. You know, I think realistically, we're still probably talking 4 or 5 years before we can drive on it. But the major, hey, are we going to do it? Is it going to be a tolled facility or a non-tolled facility? And it's still moving forward as a tolled facility. That's what I think everybody in the region expects. And if you look at it from an equity standpoint, not from the driver's perspective, but from the other cities and counties that have built it, it's a toll facility. So we're excited with the progress, and we're excited to hopefully see something going on next year and land acquisition begin in earnest on that. Then, you know, the other one, not League City, but, you know, State Highway 146, we can see all the new concrete beams, the new roadway. Somebody talks about the Kemah Bridge and the Seabrook Bridge, and so they're competing with height. I don't understand all that. And then locally here in League City, one of the things we hear about is, you know, the connection of League City Parkway to Friendswood. That construction began a month or so ago. They've been doing clearing and grubbing. They're working on getting their plans finalized and working with Friendswood on how we tie that together and make sure we don't step on their toes as we get that going. The other piece of that project is the widening of it from Maple Leaf to Bay Area Boulevard from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And all of those pieces of the project are being done by the development community, you know, as part of their development process. So we're excited about that. The North Landing Bridge Extension, another John Baumgartner legacy project. Nick didn't talk about that one. We think that one is on to construction this year. It's still a couple of years away before we drive on that, but TxDOT should bid that in the summer and should be under construction late this year, and that will provide relief from 518 north across the creek and onto I-45. I think we saw the video on Grissom Road. 2 lanes of that are complete. We're driving on that today. And then as we look forward, obviously we can't, you know, stop with those projects, but we continue to work with TxDOT on widening 517 to Alvin from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. We're excited about that. And then FM 646 from just say Highway 3 out to 146 is going to get widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes to more of an urban project. And then the other thing we're trying to get accomplished is another connection to the south to 517. And every time we turn around, there seems to be another rock in the road. So, we're pushing on Hobbs Road, we're pushing on McFarland Road, and need to figure out how to fund that, how to build that, and how to work collaboratively with our neighbors to the south, Dickinson in the case of Hobbs Road, and how to get that aligned with Cemetery Road so there's not an offset out there. And so we think about that. And then the last series of projects we're working on, League City Parkway. I know we're just getting done with I-45, I promise that. Next is League City Parkway. We've got projects planned at Highway 3, at Walker Street, where we'll add auxiliary turn lanes to help settle some of that traffic down. And then as we go further west, Landing Boulevard will get a signal and turn lanes, and then Bay Area Boulevard, and then it won't be too long we're going to have to start looking at Maple Leaf and those things. And so, traffic and transportation is the forefront of what we do every day, and we continue to make progress on all the projects and work collaboratively again with our neighbors, with TxDOT, with the development community. So that's a long answer to which should be an easy question.
We've got 11 more to get through, John. We're going to have to pick up the pace.
All right, I'll try to be brief. Well, I learned from Pat, though.
We might need those green and red cards for John.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
When you think back to 2022, what would you say you're most proud of? What accomplishment?
Well, certainly the progress on Grand Parkway and getting that going is a big item. There's not just sort of one thing. We've made progress. Those who were here in 2011, I don't know how many, but we were in water straits. We worked with GCWA to get 3 million more gallons of surface water, and so that helps ease some of that burden. And then the community center and the partnership with CCID was important. And then lastly, as Mayor Long talked about, the balanced budget, being able to meet the needs of the community and continue to reduce the tax rate.
A lot to be proud of. Sarah mentioned the population for League City is now just tick under 120,000. With a lot of growth, particularly on the southwest side, over the next 5 to 10 years, probably thousands of new homes will be coming. What are we doing to preserve the future growth, particularly with regard to water and wastewater? How are we managing that?
Yeah, so, as a community, and, the 118,000, that's a lot. I think when I came here, League City was just 85,000, so the growth has been steady and continuous. We expect it to go to about 200,000 in the next 30 years. And so, as Mayor Long talked about, strategic planning and planning is really the forefront of how do we manage that. And so we go through, in like a 5-year cycle, water, wastewater, master planning, annual strategic planning, as the mayor talked about, biannual citizen surveys, and we hear drainage and we hear traffic, out of those type of things. And then, work collaboratively with our regional partners on the planning. We talked about TxDOT, we talked about Galveston County, we talked about, the state and federal government. And so all of those things come into play. And so just, for example, as we look at the southwest side of the community, all of that's getting master planned. A year or so ago, one of those developments, they set aside 100 acres of new parkland, and so it's not just water, it's not just wastewater, it's not just transportation, and so we keep working at it. But specifically to water and wastewater, we were able to get 3 million gallons of surface water to add to our 25 million gallons a day that we already get. We have been working diligently with the city of Houston to secure 20 million gallons of additional water so that we have enough water, surface water at build out. And so that includes rebuilding the pipeline from the southeast plant in Houston near Ellington Field down Highway 3. It'll take a different route, but that'll give us additional 20 million gallons of water. There'll be, we'll have to expand the water treatment plant up there. And then, how do we do that? We have to do, all of that costs dollars and real dollars. I think now the water line's probably $100 million to us, and a plant expansion is probably very, very close to that. And so, one of the other pieces of the planning effort is we look at those costs. Every 5 years, we look at what the development community contributes as they build new homes. And so today, if you want to build a new home just for what we call water and wastewater capital recovery fees or impact fees, the first check they write is about $8,500 to help offset some of those costs so that we have a financially sustainable water system and the rates, are moderated. And the mayor talked about inflation, and inflation hits all of us and all those costs in the project costs. So that's where we're at.
It'll be 4 years this May that the 2019 bond was passed by voters. any updates on the status of drainage projects that were part of that bond?
Yeah, we're excited about the progress we've made. None of the projects, get done as fast as people like, but when we started that program, we talked about a 5-year program, and the goal is still to get those projects, completed or substantially completed within 5 years. And so it was initially it was a $75 million program, 72. I think everybody's looking at me. I got my numbers just off, but around $70 million. And so we have to take that and try to impact the projects that were the most achievable. And so we've completed several of those. I think Bay Ridge has had one project complete. There's another one under construction. Deer Ridge has a project that's complete. There are others that are in the planning stages. Oaks of Clear Creek, Dove Meadow is rapidly under construction. The Bay Colony projects are under construction. And then, near term we'll see the Meadows, Countryside, Rustic Oaks, continue to construction. And so I'm very, very optimistic, by the time the 5 years is complete, we'll be more complete than not with the majority of the projects. There's one or two projects, I say one or two, 3 or 4 where we've had to leverage our local dollars with state or federal dollars. And so those processes take a little bit more time, and so they're lagging a little bit behind. And then the major, so not Clear Creek, not Dickinson Bayou, but Gum Bayou and Benson's Bayou, looking at how to make improvements in there with the dollars that we have and go through the environmental permitting process. And those are a little bit behind the raw subdivision projects. What we've heard from the neighborhoods where the projects are complete or near complete has been a tremendous success in the impact of those projects on those neighborhoods. So we're real excited about that and look forward to kind of wrapping that up, by May of 2024.
Let's stay on the topic of drainage mitigation for a second, but the Upper Clear Creek Dickinson Bayou study came up with several mitigation strategies for drainage for the area, including League City. Can you tell us what the next phase of that study is, specifically getting that funded?
Yeah, you said the magic word. How do we get that funded? So Clear Creek and Dickinson Bayou studies, we started those projects kind of what can we do to make a material difference in the 100-year water surface elevation. And at that time we talked about, can we make a 1-foot difference or can we make a 2-foot difference? And so as we studied those watersheds, the single biggest thing that impacts those watersheds is some sort of bypass channel. In the Clear Creek watershed, that likely takes the form of some sort of tunnel because there's really not a good route for bypass. And in the Dickinson Bayou, again, some sort of bypass channel. And so as we sit here today, those projects are well north of $1 billion. And so when you look at, hey, how can you get a partner to fund any of those projects? You look at what's the benefit cost ratio. And at this point in time, based on the pure benefit cost analysis, they don't measure up. And so one of the things we've looked at is there a way that the federal government will consider the indirect cost? So certainly the direct cost is, my house was damaged, what's it take to repair it? But the indirect cost is, what does it do to the economy and what does it do to the lives of the people affected by that? If you can get people back to work faster, can you save dollars that way? I'm not going to say it's a new concept, but it's a concept that is not fully accepted by the federal government. So we submitted and applied to the Army Corps of Engineers for what we call a WARTA grant, and $3 million for additional study on that particular piece of it to see if we can improve our benefit cost ratio. That's been included in the WARTA bill. We're waiting to see if it gets, funded as we talk about, what the deficit is and those kind of things. The other thing that came out of the study is there are some smaller projects that we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers in the state to get funded, and we hope to get some information on that later this year. So Clear Creek has a bypass at 270 they're looking at, and then we'd like to look at the bridges at Highway 3 and the railroad bridge perhaps to improve the flow. And as we do that, we have to think about downstream. If we improve the flow at Highway 3 and 270 and the railroad bridge, how do we get out of the lake so we don't raise the lake level during that cost? So the work continues on those projects. Like I said, the big thing is unless somebody writes me a check for $1 billion, we're going to have to continue to work on those things.
John, safety is a huge priority for residents and businesses. As our city continues to grow, what are we doing to keep the city safe?
Yeah, so, League City has always been classified as one of the safest cities in Texas and safest cities in the U.S., and so those are areas where we have to look at continually, certainly as it relates to growth, and so this year was no different. While we didn't add any new police officers, Chief Ratliff has worked hard to get his allocated staffing for uniformed officers fully staffed. We're proud of him, and in doing that, it's a continued challenge for him because, he's got an allocated staff of 135, and we have a few retirements every year, and recruitment has been challenging as we go forward. But in addition to working hard on the staffing piece, we've also got a new technology, but a technology we're utilizing for police work. It's called a flock camera, and it's a license plate reader, and it's a real force multiplier because it puts eyes and ears all over the community. He's in the process of, installing, or maybe they're installed, but implementing the use of those flock cameras. There's 42 of them identified for League City, and it'll help him, after a crime or something, you can see that the people that come and go, and in fact, the technology has already been used to provide better police services and better ability to identify and catch criminals as they leave the city, because both Friendswood and Webster have those cameras already. And so it'll be a great new tool, and I know he's, like I said, excited to use it. He's sitting there shaking his head yes, and so we're excited about that. As it relates to EMS, we currently run 4 ambulances 24 hours a day. Council last year approved the funding for a 5th half-day ambulance, and so we're in the process with supply chain, getting that ambulance constructed. We hope to have it in the community by late spring or early summer, and with that we'll hire 2 paramedics and 2 EMTs and run it between 12 and 14 hours a day. And then lastly, as we look at fire, the growth in the traffic certainly challenges us. My challenge to our volunteer fire department is, what can we do to maintain response times? And they've risen to the challenge, but it continues to get harder and harder. Last year during the budget process, Council did 2 things to help support the volunteers. They authorized funding to fund a 2nd stipend crew. So what we do today is we pay a crew during the daytime to staff a fire station with 4 firefighters and be ready rather than respond from businesses or from homes. And again, the daytime's probably our most critical time. And we also use a stipend crew even at night. But they've provided funding for the 2nd stipend crew. And currently we're able to get that staffed probably near 50% of the time. And then the last thing, it's still just a stipend. They increased the stipend pay about 25%. And so then the last thing related to fire is, as we go to the southwest, where are we going to put stations, and can we get volunteers in the new areas of town? And so we're looking at all those things.
You mentioned supply issues as it relates to the ambulance, and Nick certainly talked about inflation. How are supply chain and inflation factors impacting the city's projects, particularly capital improvement? Yeah,
well, Nick hit it on the head when he talked about price escalation, and the escalation we've seen with construction projects is probably nearly 1% a month or 12% a year. And so, if you started with projects you identified in 2018, you passed a bond in 2019, all of those projects are going up. And if a couple of years of that, you're not able to build as many projects unless you leverage your local dollars. So price escalation is the first one. Contractors are requiring us, to pay for materials and supplies as soon as the contract's executed, so that they can secure with the manufacturers those materials. And then we see a limited number of bidders, as well as, most important, schedule and predictability of when projects are going to be complete. And then it's not just construction; it's hiring of people, it's replacing vehicles. We try to replace police cars. We have to get our orders in now 2 years ahead of time, and they're just making a limited number of them. So we're having to be more strategic on how we're going to do that, and it's going to change the way we do business with those kind of things. And so, just like everybody out there, I know you all are aware of it. The whole supply chain thing is just driving us nuts.
Apart from the construction and improvements with traffic that we talked about, what else can residents look forward to in 2023?
Well, our future's bright. League City's in great shape. We're going to see continued residential growth. The engineering department and the planning department, just as we sit here right now today, there are 2,000 lots under construction. Now, our home building the last few years has been about 300 to 400 homes a year, but back in 2012 we were building nearly 1,000. So it's not, it wouldn't surprise me that once the interest rate thing gets straightened out, that we'll see 1,000 new homes a year. But there's 2,000 lots on the southwest side of town. There's 4 different major developers. Petrogol's down there at the very south end of Hobbs Road, down by 517. Westland Ranch is off of Maple Leaf Drive, and both of those developments have lots on the ground and they're building homes. And then Hillwood is working on the far west side of town, west of Westwood, so between League City Parkway and 517. They've bought thousands of acres. They're the ones working on the extension of League City Parkway. And the Lennar Homes is working on, I'll call it the north end of Hobbs Road. Obviously, it's far south League City. It's right next to Irvin and Hobbs Road. And they're probably a few months from having houses on the ground. Is Christopher here? No, Christopher's our city engineer, and so he's supposed to nod his head that I'm pretty close with my timeline, but I'm sure I am. And then the last, kind of major thing, we saw Grissom Road, it's about half done today. It's supposed to be done by summer. The folks that own the land just north of Grissom Road, and they own it all the way up to 528 and points beyond, is they're starting to work on master planning their land and coming forward with things. And then, mobility and drainage continue to be on the forefront. How do we keep ourselves, make ourselves more resilient to storms? I think we've done a lot. Certainly we're not done. Continued investment in CIP. Nick talked about $100 million, for 2023. A lot of that our dollars, some of that partner dollars. But our 5-year CIP is reflective of about $500 million now between transportation and drainage and water, wastewater, and some for amenities, such as the parks and trails and things. And then the economy, certainly is a concern to us. And then, the next thing, and Nick hit on this, is, with all the great ideas and all the needs of the community, is how do we pay for it between, user fees and taxes. And, we're a conservative community by nature, but certainly we have a lot of great ideas, and so continue to work with the community and the council on how to afford that.
Let's talk about Bay Colony Park. When do we think construction begins there?
Yeah, so Bay Colony Park, for those of you who don't know where that is, that's there's 106 total acres. About 15 of it is reserved for the Grand Parkway that goes through it. And so that leaves, about 85 acres for park and detention, and it's located between Hobbs Road and Calder Road and at Irvin Drive, so kind of on the near west side of the city and towards the south end. And it includes 5 softball fields, 4 baseball fields, 2 soccer fields, tennis courts, pickleball courts, and then, we call it a 5K loop, but I know it's 2K and you have to take 2.5 times around to get to 5K. And that's okay. It's still our 5K loop and we're good with that. And so that project is anticipated to start construction in early 2024, and it's every bit of an 18-month to 2-year build. So 2026 before we'll be able to play on fields at the new Bay Colony Park. But we're excited about that facility. I know the Parks Department's excited about that facility, and I know the softball ladies are excited. They want to get out of the sportsplex and have their own complex over there.
Think back to 22 and ahead to 2023. What would you say the biggest challenge was last year, and what do you think the biggest challenge will be for us this year?
Yeah, so in 2022, certainly the whole supply chain, the inflation, everything cost more, and so just how to balance, the needs of the community, the needs of the organization, and then just, keeping our eye on the ball, and that's the Grand Parkway, that's the, the coastal barrier. Those are heavy lifts. We have no necessarily direct influence, but certainly if we don't stay on it, they get kind of pushed aside. And just having the wherewithal to stay with, like I said, I've been here 11 years. I worked on the Grand Parkway every year of those 11 years. And so, we as a community, need to support those giant initiatives where we can. Again, that's in Grand Parkway in the barrier. And so those, like I said, those are the challenges, or nothing gets done. And so kind of, as we, look at the challenges for 2023, a couple obvious ones, the price of eggs, and everyone, has to deal with that. They've gone from what, $1.50 to $5 or $6. And then the big ask for everybody in this room, if you can help me out, we have dogs available at the animal shelter, and it's bursting at the seams. I think Chief Ratliff said I could give them away today if you go over there within the next hour, and so no adoption fees. And so he's now trying to think how he's going to make that come true when all of you go over there. But if the shelter's empty, we are going to be very, very happy. But but in all seriousness, the growth, the maintaining revenues to address growth-related issues, delivering on the CIP. We're in the home stretch for the bond program, and then working closely with our first responders to keep our community safe and ready to respond in times of emergency.
Last question, then we'll go to the audience questions. When you think about the next number of years ahead of us, John, what would you say your vision is overall for League City?
Well, the future's bright for League City. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. A great place to do business. I think as we look forward, I think the whole strategic planning process, and certainly the short-term part of that, but the long-term, I think we've got some challenges as we grow with fire. The continued investment for traffic drainage infrastructure, the police department, the technology, hiring people, keeping people at the organization. As we talked about the water in the sewer, it's not sexy. It's below the ground. We don't see it. We turn our faucets on. We expect it to come out of the faucet and get charged a penny a gallon for water. The Grand Parkway, storm resiliency, West Side Rec Center. The projects and the needs of the community will continue, and how we pay for them. Connection from League City down to 517 on the west side. But in closing, I think we look to continue to provide world-class customer service, and do everything we can to make 2023 the very best year in League City's history. And so it's a great place to live, a great place to raise a family, a great place to do business, and I appreciate all the help everyone out there gives us to make League City very, very good. So thank you.
Good. We're not done yet. So
we're not.
And now it's audience questions. So John, you got a choice. I can give you a couple of softballs, or we can get to the hard stuff.
We like the easy ones. I don't have any more notes.
So what is the most recent book you read?
The most recent book I read. You don't want to know that one.
I think they do, John.
1 second after.
Well, tell us more.
1 second after.
Yeah.
So it's the EMP that explodes, and we all start all over. It's very depressing.
It's good to have a city manager that's prepared, right?
It teaches you a lot about being prepared, yes.
Question here. I see lots of subdivisions, homes being built. Are schools prepared to handle the influx of new students?
Well, I see people here from CCISD, but if you think about the new homes, and I know CCISD is prepared, as is Dickinson ISD, but the new homes that we're building, many of those are in Dickinson ISD. Many are in CCISD, but many are in Dickinson ISD, and then some are going to be in Santa Fe ISD, so all that area. And so we do work closely with the school district and, give them our development plans. We don't totally control that, and so I believe they're prepared. I don't see any CCISD heads shaking their head. There we go. We got a thumbs up. That's what I expected.
Please discuss the importance of volunteers and opportunities in the city.
Yeah, so we use volunteers for many things. Particularly our police department has volunteers. They got a volunteer in policing program. The animal shelter is heavily dependent on volunteers to making their no-kill status successful, and how they work with our paid staff over there to have a great animal shelter. And then the library is very, very heavily dependent on volunteers. And then certainly all the boards and commissions, and there's probably more than a dozen of them, all work to help advise us and give us leadership to make successful programs throughout the community.
A couple of questions about the Amazon warehouse on 96. Plans to repurpose, and then also what the disposition is of the warehouse and impact of the city.
Well, we were excited when we heard Amazon was coming, and they didn't want any incentives, and we worked closely with them to get their facility built. Obviously, we're disappointed that once it got constructed that it didn't get occupied. The folks that live there from a traffic perspective were probably happy. The folks that have businesses and restaurants over there and were thinking they'll get some more business are not quite as happy. I've not heard any formal plans regarding what Amazon plans to do with it, and is there a adaptive reuse for the facility? Obviously, it's huge, and certainly an opportunity for someone needing warehouse space.
A couple more. How can we use wastewater, turn wastewater into reclaimed water for local farms or gardens that could be open to the public?
Yeah, so so a couple things on what we call wastewater reuse, and so, you know, we talked about water and sewer just a little bit, and I know numbers may not mean anything to you, but today, on an average day, you know, our wastewater plants, you know, produce about, you know, 8 to 10 million gallons of wastewater a day. It's, from a wastewater perspective, it's very high quality. Currently, from a reuse perspective, we send about between 1 million and 2 million gallons a day to the South Shore Golf Course. So we're already doing some of that, not having to use treated drinking water to irrigate that. The ability to do that, you know, really rests in, can we come up with an economical way to capture it, to store it, and send it out into a system that gets it to, you know, homes is pretty hard, but into park areas, green space areas, and we're working with a consultant today to better understand the economics necessary to do that. And so, you know, like I said, the golf course is easy because they have a pipeline and it takes it to them. Mad Creek Golf Course has the rights to use our wastewater effluent from the West Side plant, but thus far they've been using canal water in lieu of effluent. There'll be a time when we get to use more of our effluent on some of the green space type things.
Last two questions are about timelines for construction. You might have talked about this, but if you have, remind us. The widening of 517, the timeline for that.
So the widening of 517 from approximately 646 west to Alvin they're in the process of land acquisition. So, you know, every year it seems to get put off of another year, but it's certainly near term, meaning, well, probably not 2023, but possibly in 2024. It is an active project. TxDOT's working on it actively. I think they're, just like us, you know, they've got lots of projects and then they've got cost overruns, and it seems to get shoved slightly to the side. And so maybe Senator Middleton can help us with that one.
John,
sorry to put you on the spot, sir.
Last but not least, you mentioned 646 expanding from Highway 3 to 146.
Yeah.
A timeline for that one?
That one seems to be a little bit ahead of 517, so I would think that would be under construction within a year. Obviously, it's dependent on TxDOT, it's dependent on land acquisition. Those are always the hard ones, making the deal with each individual property owners. It does include overpass over Highway 3 and the railroad. That'll be welcomed, and then, you know, obviously tie into 146 at the other end, and we're all waiting for that. So yeah, no, that one's pretty congested there on the east side.
Well, thank you for the questions. John, thanks for the answers, and I think we'll turn it back over to DeJuan.
Thank you.